Hello, my name is David Roche. I'm a Welsh composer based in Cambridge in the UK, and in this video I'm going to talk through my piece Sculptures, which won first prize in the Dante Moro Composition Competition. Hooray! This video is split into two halves. The first half contains information about the competition, what it is, what I wrote and how I write, and the second half, that's where I talk about all the technical stuff specific to the piece of music, Sculptures. I've time-stamped everything in the description so you can have a look through and check out stuff that might interest you. Part 1. So, for the uninitiated, lots of performing musicians, orchestras, festivals and classical music organisations set up contests for composers. The idea is that people send in their music, a judging panel looks it over, and eventually a winner is picked and they get a prize, which is usually a performance, a commission, money or a recording. These sorts of contests are a bit of a hot potato, but in my experience, as long as you're careful, then they're well worth doing. At their best, they provide access to new networks, give you a chance to build relationships, get some cash and get some performances. I've had some really great experiences off the back of contests. The Dante Moro Composition Competition requests that entrants write a piece for solo piano and string orchestra, with the prize being a performance, recording and cash. The size of the string section is quite specific. It's a strong and compact chamber group of 5 violins, 4 second violins, 3 violas, 2 cellos and a double bass. Writing to the ensemble is key, and its size presents composers with certain concerns, like dealing with a single double bass player. Because there's one player, you are able to be slightly more adventurous with the instrumental writing, but it means, especially in the context of a larger ensemble, that you're less likely to hear it doing what I think it does best, which is those long, low notes, unless you double it like everyone, including myself, always does. But this may not be an issue for everyone. I'm always trying to make my stuff sound beefy. I'm just saying the composers must be mindful of the size of the ensemble. A further stipulation is that the composed works have to be based on the art of acclaimed Italian artist Dante Moro, hence the title of the competition. A nice clear brief relating to an enormously inspiring collection of art, which is all very wonderful. Not that this makes anything less challenging. Occupying a mental space where you create something that you think is good, something that you really value, is obviously always going to be hard. Composing is like any other skill, study or instrument. You've got to practice and work to get better. In the spirit of this, I write as much as I can, I write every day, I get feedback on my work, and I try to be single-minded and do my own thing without shutting the door on influences and new music. Most of what I write is for fun, this is important to me, but composing is also my job, so it's good if I can direct new dots towards a potential performance, potential work, or potential money. Like many freelancers, I was definitely freaking out about work at the start of lockdown, which is when I started writing Sculptures. So yeah, this piece was created during a period of panic, worry and productivity. When I began Sculptures, I was working on 3 commissions concurrently. 2 for the Vale of Glamorgan Festival for Welsh pianists Sue and Rhys and Hugh Watkins on solo piano, and a second piece for the BBC National Orchestra of Wales, and a chamber commission for Manchester-based Safa, which also contains piano. So I had piano on the brain. The Vale of Glamorgan Festival commissions were almost there, but I was really actively working on the commission for Safa, and this was at the front of my mind. Their pianist, Benjamin Powell, is a phenomenal performer, and when working with him on a commission for toy piano and percussion, linked in the description, I remember him jokingly trying to play Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto on the tiny little instrument. The first big texture that you get in that concerto is the piano and the strings playing together, also with clarinet, but I didn't know that until I looked it up. It does feel like something I should know. Anyway, here's that section. Strings and piano were, more or less, the ensemble I was planning on writing for as part of the Dante Moro competition, so it makes sense that this was also at the front of my mind when I started Sculptures. I was thinking of big, flashy, romantic-sounding concertos that also have sentimental, gentler, really gorgeous melodies. Generally speaking, I really like unironically sentimental, traditionally beautiful tonal music. It's not very fashionable, but it's what I write, and I definitely won't shut the door on it or anything. So, how did I actually compose this piece? Brace yourself. I sat down at my computer, opened Sibelius, and started by trying to input notes that I thought would sound good. That's right, just Sibelius. The whole thing was done on there, start to finish. Every single note was blooped in with the click of a mouse, each click more exhilarating and playful than the last, my pen and paper becoming dusty and forgotten. I messed around, deleted and added stuff, copying and pasting with wild abandon until I found something that I just wanted to listen to over and over again. Nothing was concrete, I was just aiming for 10 or so quality bars. It was just solo piano at first. I'm a fan of short score, and I think that good form comes from good content, and it's easy to make things complicated, so I try to keep it simple. Eventually I started adding string parts, and from that point it really began to feel like the piece was worth completing fully and totally. So that's when I really decided to commit to the piece. I shaped the work over the next few months, and once I'd reached a point where I considered it finished, I began to check and recheck the practicality of all the instrumental writing, thoroughly editing the piece of music in the process, resisting the urge to polish and edit the score too early. My priority is always the music itself. I don't care how I reach the final product, as long as I like it, as long as it is the best that I can do. I think it's a cliche of contemporary classical music to make a great looking score for a piece of music that doesn't work at all. I have certainly been guilty of this, and I see many students in this predicament too. A person's awareness of instrumental writing is engaged before they click a button or put a pen to paper. Focus on the resultant real-world sound. That's what I'm trying to do, at least. So, once it was finished, Sculptures split nicely into 3 movements, each movement being based on a small work of art by Dante Moro. Here are the titles and the accompanying images. I'll save you my dreadful pronunciation. Sculptures came to be about contortion, nostalgia and sentimentality. I'm no art historian, but even I can see these themes in the art. And I knew quite early on that I wanted to project a feeling of remembered haziness through the pan-diatonic background, loneliness and fragility through simple melodies, and a sense of poisoned change contrasted with unbound, overjoyed freedom. I didn't have all this written down as a goal. I didn't really know how this was going to happen, but composing in conjunction with the art, it's where I felt the music should go. It doesn't always work this smoothly. This piece came together reasonably quickly, even if the redrafting was endless. Regardless, each of the beautifully evocative works of art led me to different musical places, and the contrasts between these places allowed me to more fully express the aspects of Dante Moro's art that I found most moving. If you've enjoyed what I've been saying, then please subscribe and like this video. And before finishing up, I'd just like to say a huge thanks to the organisers for picking this piece. It's something I'm really proud of, and I'm really excited to hear the performance. Links to the dates and times of the performances are in the description, and you can buy the score on my site, so go and do it immediately, please. Thank you for listening. Okay, in this second part, I'm going to focus on the technical elements of my piece Sculptures. This piece is a concerto for piano and string orchestra, awarded first prize in the Dante Moro Composition Competition. Woohoo! And I'm going to focus on 5 separate points and hopefully not meander too much. So, point 1. I like lots of flats. I also like keys. This piece starts off in G flat major. I'm not trying to make any grand points by writing in a key. It just feels lovely on the piano. Lots of black keys, almost like an improvisation exercise that you'd give a young child, or I'd give a young child. I teach piano as well. And it's a more subdued key for the strings too, owing to the lack of super resonant notes and open strings. This ties in strongly with certain aspects of Dante Moro's art. Much of it has a soft and loving edge, and lots of it engages with themes relating to maternal love and family love and home. So I was trying to forefront this softness from the outset. Muted soltasto strings, gently pinged notes in the piano, and warm resonance. Back when I was a student, I was once told that flat keys are associated with love and elation. This gave me a good link to a lot of Dante Moro's art. But I just love taking a throwaway idea about something incredibly profound and just living by it. So it supports the feel of Sculptures, sure, but I'd do it anyway. Perhaps more uniquely to this composition, rooting the piece in a key gave me a bit of space to make things sound off or contorted. And this enabled me to represent important aspects of Dante Moro's art by creating relationships between more traditionally tonal material and off-center disrupted tonal material. I spent quite a large chunk of the piece messing around with ideas in a loose and intuitive way, aiming to build these contrasts and carve out enough room for listeners to feel the irony that results from this. You can sense some of these contrasts by comparing the following excerpts. There are big, overly romantic sounding melodies. There are melting, contorted glissandi against big virtuosic gestures, and these contrast with the more traditionally tonal sections. I'm not a big fan of using tonality ironically. We shouldn't be ashamed to write in a key or in any way we see fit at all, but in sculptures, I'm not writing in a key as a way of criticizing tonal music. I'm writing in a key to create a reflection of the art I'm being inspired by. This is about engaging with Dante Moro's works rather than criticizing a form of music. I'm trying to make an awesome piece of music. Point 2. I like to sustain notes. I've already shown the music in the following example, but it's a really important part of the piece. I love picking out and sustaining individual melody notes. It helps colour simple, free melodic lines and 110% stimulates my intuition, directs the piece and feeds my inspiration. In each of the following 3 examples, the melody notes are being sustained by the strings. Once we've been through each segment, I'll chat a bit more. Okay, now this section is a little further in. Here's the hyper-romantic section again. I find that the long, sustained notes generate a natural feeling harmony that relates directly to the material that I'm using. Nature and the natural are themes in a lot of Dante Moro's art, so this felt like a fruitful path to follow. But honestly, I think that it just sounds cool. I also find that the resultant harmonies work well as a starting point for the piece as a whole. Once a kind of basic harmonic language has been initiated, I begin to have expectations about where it should go. This also then gives me space to subvert expectation, allowing me to tap into ideas relating to contortion and poisoning prevalent in Dante Moro's art. For example, I can choose to avoid the harmonies I've previously used. Overall consistency of musical language is maintained by sticking to 3 or 4 note chords. Change and harmonic movement is intensified through the movement of the bass line or chromatic alteration of a motif. This all sounds and looks way more technical than it is. I make an enormous effort to write intuitively. I used to write really dissonant, ultra-technical, microtonal music, and I was super influenced by Boulez's pitch multiplication. I spent a lot of time in his music, and I studied tons of stuff about set theory and all that gubbins. It's hard to get away from something when you spend years with it, and set theoretical rules do come into play when I'm thinking about the impact a transposition will have or when I'm thickening a line. I sometimes use interval vectors to determine which transpositions will have the greatest number of similar pitches. I sometimes thicken lines by using the intervals available in a given pitch class set. I find that post-tonal theory often operates in broader strokes. You start a pattern and follow it until you don't like it anymore. But again, intuition is more important to me than anything else. Knowing things has helped me understand what materials I wanted to use. You're never worse off for knowing more things, and I won't shut the door on anything, dissonant, tonal, or otherwise. But, and I can't stress this enough, intuition is more important to me than anything. I am the only person able to make the decisions that I make. There's no point in having all the tools if you don't know what you're building. The music is more important than the technique and more important than the art inspiring it, or at least it is for me. An idea I really wanted to make use of was the off-kilter feeling, irrational time signatures in Thomas Ades's and John Adams's music. I kind of make use of this in sculptures. There are 1,000,001 YouTube videos on this already, so I'd suggest checking out those if you're unsure of what these types of rhythms are. David Bruce's video is in the description, or just go on Wikipedia, it's on there too. Here's a quick snippet of a piece to show you what I mean. You can hear those stumbling bars in the music. That's the irrational time signatures at play. I did something similar but more rhythmically straightforward in my piece My Mind Directs My World. I wanted the pulse to feel coherent but dramatically irregular, and I also wanted it to contribute to the lyrical writing. In order to make this performable, I tried to keep the beats manageably large and simple. I know it's not actually an irrational time signature, so don't worry. I frequently move in dotted quavers, dotted eighth notes, and occasionally I will create a bar consisting entirely of 2, 3 or 4 dotted quavers, performers always having the anchor of a downbeat or the scaffolding of an established beat to guide their playing. Gradually dividing up these dotted note beats, chopping them into different sizes, or just playing with the feel they create is exciting. The irregularity with which the dotted notes appear creates a really cool rhythmic intensity in play, but I try to keep it clear for the rest of the musicians. The strings have a slightly easier time here. The pianist is the person that has the hardest time, but they are the soloist, so I hope they're finding it fun. As I said, I know these aren't true irrational time signatures. Wikipedia tells me that the denominator in the time signature shouldn't be a power of 2. I'm desperately trying to avoid discussing the theory bit of it. But it's kind of a similar principle and has a similar impact. An awkward number of beats appearing without a new tempo being articulated. It wouldn't have the same tension if it wasn't related to and returning to an established pulse. It's about an unexpected change, a stumbling feel within the feel of the pulse. Or at least that's what it is to me. Point 4. I like repetition. I love repetitive writing, and lots of my music is based around repeating patterns. I'm reluctant to call them ostinati because, even though that's a good and well-established word, that's not how I think about them. To me, they're more like riffs on a guitar. The technical difference and richness of the lineage here is important. Lots of guitar music is based around insistent, perfectly metronomic repetition. In a similar vein, I also spend a lot of time repeating canons, displacing them by an octave or so, and accompanying them with a bass line. These two ideas can combine too. There are lots of fully repeated patterns in the piano with chords underneath. The big problem with this type of writing is that it can get boring really quickly, right? Especially if a composer sets up the expectation that the music should be going somewhere. I think it's obvious that I'm influenced by a lot of minimalism, but I'm not trying to evoke a meditative state. I'm more interested in the exciting changes and forward drives associated with rock music. So I spend time gradually changing the dynamics, edging them up as the music progresses, giving the music the subtle changes I feel it requires in the face of such one-for-one repetition. Again, this is massively indebted to the rock and metal music that I play, what I would consider my musical core. Cool examples of hyper-repetitive songs that I like are The Way the News Goes by Periphery and a lot of stuff off Reliant K's album, Forget and Not Slow Down. Traditionally speaking, the guitar on the left speaker will have the one riff and the guitar on the right speaker will have some chords that, go nicely with the riff, or vice versa. The fatigue that comes with direct repetition can also be mitigated by gradually increasing chromaticism. I often gradually move through a cycle of fifths. You don't need to reinvent the wheel to give a sense of harmonic movement without disrupting the overall harmony too massively. The contrapuntal movement in the previous example creates further interest within the repetitious material. It also supports the feelings of twisting and contortion directly relating to Dante Moro's works. The consistent transposition of a perfect fifth also helped me move towards C major, a stable key later in the piece, feeling almost nauseating in the process. Again, it relates to this idea of contortion and twisting. Shifting to C major was important to me as it would allow me to make use of the beautiful and powerful open strings in the violins, giving me a greater capacity for instrumental colour and access to a more powerful and resonant tone, particularly important in the very repetitious sections that require subtle change, but also providing a burst of colour in a 3-movement piece dominated by quite subdued heavy sounds. Point 5. I like glissandi. The last cool thing I'd like to talk about is the use of glissandi in sculptures. It is absolutely everywhere. It's particularly useful in this piece as it supports my art-inspired aim of presenting beautiful things and transforming them in a contorted, melted manner. Again, I wouldn't be using it if I didn't think it sounded awesome. Intuition first, everything else second. This is also one of those techniques that is a little different in person, so please remember to consider your performers every step of the way. When used carefully, the glissandi can help create a gentle sense of movement. They can contribute to something a bit more intense. Or they can be the defining feature of a musical idea on their own. I just love the tectonic, falling feeling of this kind of writing. I was working on an orchestral song cycle alongside sculptures, and it's filled with similar gestures. It's the musical equivalent of that feeling when you're just going over the top of a roller coaster. As with all pieces of music, there's an infinite number of things to talk about, but if I could communicate only one piece of information to anyone listening, it'd be this. Write whatever you want and do so as fully and freely as you can. Use the tools you need to make what you want, don't bend to pressure. Only act on feedback if you're truly convinced by it. So much for just one point. Just do your own thing. If you've enjoyed what I've been saying, then please subscribe and like the video. And before finishing up, I'd just like to say a huge thanks to the organisers for picking sculptures. Again, it's something I'm really, really proud of, and I'm so excited to hear the performances. Links to the dates and times of the performances are in the description. You can buy the score on my site and go and do it. And please make sure you like the Dante Moro Composition Competition page on Facebook, and just check out all of the music and all of the videos by all of the participants. They're really great, they're really interesting. Thanks for listening.